Hey guys, welcome to the cutting room. This channel is all about independent horror films, the good, the bad, and the ones that deserve way more attention than they get. My name's Nick, and I've been making indie movies for about 10 years now, and I'm here to talk about these horror movies honestly and respectfully, with a focus on discovering the underrated movies that are real gems. Some of these films are rough, and some of them are incredible, and a lot of them are worth your time. If you like indie horror like I do, finding new and like to find new movies, you've come to the right place. So let's get into it. Today we're talking about Velvicide from 2026. This movie came across my desk, or I should say, across my computer, a few days ago, and I wanted to check it out because it's brand new. I think it's just on Prime right now to rent for about $3, which isn't bad. Um, really enjoyed it. It was a very psychological movie. Let's see, let me read the description. When Velvet agrees to recount her abduction for a true crime documentary, the story she tells doesn't match the facts. As her confession deepens, the crew begins to realize her version of events isn't just telling the past, it's rewriting it. So there's that. The movie does deal a lot with self-harm and suicide, so, uh, take that into consideration. It's a very touchy subject, I know, with a lot of people, but I feel like this movie, really dives into it in a new creative way, and nothing too crazy or too violent, too bloody, too gory. None of that. It really goes into the, humanity of the characters and, like, what they've done and how they've dealt with these things in their lives. And how they've dealt with these feelings the entire time. Um, let's see. Velocide opens with Callum, our working at a suicide prevention hotline. Woman calls immediately and throws him off script. She's not asking for help in the way he's trained to handle. Instead, she says she wants to murder her husband and demands Callum be real with her. He's clearly uncomfortable and doesn't know what to do. The call ends with the woman shooting her husband, then turning the gun on herself. That's your opening scene, and it's really dark and unsettling. Because it's the first, I want to say, like 10 minutes of the movie. So there's that. The main story, we're introduced to Velvet, the female lead, who's sitting in front of a camera with entire film crew. She's there to tell her story about being kidnapped and essayed by a stranger who she can't identify. They're filming a documentary to help find the guy. Isaac, the director, asks the questions. He's doing a good job at getting information, though he can be a little aggressive at times with Velvet, and she doesn't appreciate it too much. Let's see, Velvet kidnapping story. She recounts being home alone with when her ex-boyfriend barges in. After a brief argument, she kicks him out and goes to take a shower. She hears noises downstairs and is suddenly abducted. She's thrown in the back of a car with her hands tied behind her back, and eventually taken to a basement where she is chained by the ankle to a giant safe. I don't know why there's a safe. I don't know what this safe signifies, but it was just kind of like it was just there. A little odd, but I'm here to go with it. The kidnapper is a man who appears to be between 55 and 65 years old. He wears a voice modulator, so she can't recognize his voice. Yeah, you can kind of see it in the movie where it's this mic that comes around his mouth, and you can't really make out what he's saying because it's really distorted and modulated to a point where, like, even though she's real close to him, she still can't, like, hear his real voice, or that's what I perceived the movie anyways. And she just doesn't know what he sounds like and can't nail who he actually is. He brings her food, a sandwich cut into quarters. That's one of her quirks. The exact way she makes it at home. Along with the food, he brings her pill so she can commit suicide. Yeah, the first scene one of the first scenes we see after, he brings her into this space is, she's there in this what seems to be a basement for a while, and brings her, I think, a water and that sandwich, tomatoes with grilled cheese or something like that cut into quarters on rye, like, that's her sandwich, that's, what she grew up having, that's her thing, and she's wondering, how he knew it or whatever, and, she's very, like, taken aback by this because how did he know this? She starts reciting, like, her address, like, things that mattered to her, where her dad is. Her dad is, I think, in a hospital, and he's like in hospice. He's not doing too well. So there's that. And she gets very kind of terrified. She gets very terrified because like he's been watching her for a bit. He knows all this stuff. He knows who she is. So, there's that. But also with the pills, it seems like this guy is wanting to force her to commit suicide because you learn later on that she tried it herself, and she's one of the people who called the hotline. Later on, it's revealed that way, anyways. And I guess he saw her as weak and wanted her to just go ahead and do it. They're in downstairs in the basement. There are multiple cameras watching her. Um, and she just doesn't want to make a move or doesn't want to upset the guy because she doesn't know what he's gonna do. At some point, he does get up and like point a gun at her and threatens her with it, and she kind of like straightens up because she's being a smartass for a bit. Um, but he goes away and she kind of breaks down, and quickly the scene changes to our buddy Callum. We see Callum at his friend's house having a beer and food. We learn he's wheelchair bound. You kind of see it in the first part of the movie, but you're not really sure why. It comes to light that he apparently was drinking and driving, and he stopped on some train tracks, and then the train crashed into him because he fell asleep. That's apparently not the case. He was having a hard time, and he wanted to commit suicide, so he just parked on the train tracks. And at the last minute, he couldn't do it, and he, you know, jumped out of the car, but he wasn't fast enough, and like it clipped him and got his legs, and so he can't really walk very well. Um, he talks to his couple friends about the woman he talked to on the on the phone who killed herself and then offed her husband. And they're just kind of frazzled because he's very nonchalant about it. And he's like, yeah, it happened, whatever. And they're just like, you should have called somebody, should have called the cops, should have called, your supervisor, anybody to get the address and, make sure that, this is happening. But he's like, it doesn't matter, whatever. He's very like nonchalant about it. It's very strange, very, very strange. Either he's jaded or he doesn't care. There's something else going on, So I thought that was interesting. Um, we go into, um, I think the director and Velvet, I mean, their interactions are, he's just trying to direct it and he's trying to ask questions in a meaningful way. And she's, a victim and she's trying to give him the answers he wants and trying to make sure that they get this documentary and catch this guy. There's a scene where Isaac and Velvet hook up and there's a scene of them sleeping together. She seems comfortable with him. Back and forth on camera, she continues to give her interview. She reveals that the kidnapper brought her new methods of suicide every single day for months. Knives, rope, zip ties, pills, shanks, improvised devices, all kinds of things. Some of them didn't make sense. Some of them were real blatant. So there was that. Um, at some point, she does take the pills and just say fuck it. I think she's been there for what she says months in the movie. So she's been there a while. She just wants it all to be over. And she takes the pills, but she wakes up and like vomits all over her face and things like that. So she's unsuccessful in that attempt. Um, at some point the killer gets very frustrated and sits down with her and plays Go Fish without saying very much. After a few hands, he gives her the key to her cuffs and tells her to leave. She's apprehensive and thinks he'll shoot her, but he doesn't. and doesn't just lets her go and she leaves. Um, at some point, like um the interviewer Isaac, the director, even asks her, it's like, "Oh, didn't you call the cops?" And she's like, "Yeah, I did. We go into the back of the house and it was burnt to the ground." So no evidence. The interview continues. Isaac gets frustrated with the non-climactic ending of her story. She's apprehensive about sharing more details because of the trauma. He suggests one-on-one interview to get the full story, and she agrees. There's a scene where he he's trying to get the sensational ending and get all the details, and she's apprehensive for some reason, which we find out later. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. Go watch it. Um, we see her walk in with like a nice dress on, like with a gala type dress on. Um, she reveals that she's met Callum before because he called her out of the blue because he had her number from the call center. So you're not supposed to do that. She's very, like mad about that, but he just wants to talk to her and kind of like, make sure she's okay. Um so yeah, apparently she had a moment of weakness and wanted to kill herself with the gun, and that's why she calls the suicide hotline. Um let's see. And I'm not gonna go any further because it kind of reveals the ending and like what's happening with the movie. I will say this though, uh, it does feel like the what is it? The kidnapper are two different people. I will say that because the thing she says in the story is like, oh, they feel like two different people because one is nice, one is mean, and she doesn't understand why or what's going on, but she kind of figures it out. It's really surprising. I really liked the ending. It was very well done for something like this. The movie itself is great. It like the overall production value is there. They did a damn good job of shooting it creatively, and um, a very good way for the story. Sound is great, music's great, all that's good. It's probably one of the higher production independent films I've seen this year. They really put a lot into it to make it and get it made and get it finished. It's really good. I will say this though. Usually when you get into a psychological horror movie that's an indie independent movie, you do run into things that are like where somebody wants to make it 2 hours long and make it into a diatribe, and it's on and on and on. But luckily, this movie is only like an hour and 40 minutes long. So you get to the ending in good time, in good pacing, and it's not going to be like 2.5 hours long of just, bullshit or whatever, and you just get stringed along. There's a bunch of like loose ends, you just, don't know what's happening. So there's that. So it is a solid hour 40 minutes long. It is worth your time. There's a heavy focus on suicide and self-harm. It is psychological horror, but it did pull it off really well. I really did like this. I thought this was very well done. It is a bit of a slow burn, but like I said, it is an hour and 40 minutes long, so you're not waiting there forever to try to get to the ending. It's not convoluted, it's not over the top. They're not trying to trick you, they're not trying to make you seem like an idiot. It's a very well done psychological horror, which I really enjoyed. I'm glad I spent the $3 on it to buy it. I hope it does come out on a physical media. Um so that I can actually, get a copy of it, and hopefully there's like commentaries and things on it. That'd be great. Um, but yeah, let's see. I will go ahead and give it my award and my I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and give it my ranking first. Since I rank these a particular way. Let's see. We'll turn this off and we'll turn off ranking. All right, here's my rankings. All right. These rankings are for the indie horror legends from S to F. Roger Corman at the top because he's the godfather of indie film, launching careers and doing it all the way to the end. John Carpenter is right below him because he started out as just indie and made absolute classics on shoestring budgets. Charles Band comes next because he kept the indie horror scene alive through the 80s and 90s and a little bit further on. He has a bit more budget, a bit more polish to his filmmaking. Lloyd Kaufman is in the middle because he's a pure indie spirit, even if he's more about shock and chaos than quality. Jim Wynorski's are below him because basically he's all about the cheap thrills and the topless scenes over substance, which is fine. And then right at the bottom is Rob Zombie because he's a shitty filmmaker. That's why I don't like him. But anyways, we're gonna give this an award of Carpenter. This movie was done very well. I highly recommend you go watch it. It is a great movie. Slow burn a little bit. I know all these characters might not come in. Um, they might not make sense to where they place in the story, but wait until the end and everything gets explained perfectly, and concisely to the point where like you get what's going on and why these people have met and why they're in each other's lives and what's happening. Um, Also, I got to give a shout out to the one of the main actors in the movie. Let's see. Can do this, right? I can do this. Okay, here we go. Jon Devlin. I think this is Jon Devlin's fifth or sixth feature, but he also does a bunch of shorts. I've seen him a lot in the indie scene in the last year or two. He does a lot of unorthodox movies, but they're really well done. They're really well put together. The stories are great. They're simple. And he's really come up in the last few years of the indie scene. Um, I think he's trying to do more and more features and do more and more stuff on his own. Um, I'll put his information in the bottom of this video as well. Because he's one to watch. I think he's coming up quick. But I feel like we're gonna see him in a lot more stuff over the next few years. A lot more feature length films, and maybe even some studio stuff. Who knows? But he's really coming up. He's got a very unique way of doing things, and he's a very versatile actor. I've seen him be a murderer, a henchman, and now he's this like very vulnerable, damaged person with a disability in this movie, and he played it very well. He did a damn good job in this. The man deserves an Oscar, in my opinion. But I'll keep an eye out for him. You also did the same thing as well. And that's all I got. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.